Hello children, today we shall talk about how the France is becoming the constitutional monarchy. So dear children, in the previous classes we had learned that Louis XVI, who came into power in 1774, and when he came into power, to his surprise, he found the treasury of the government which was completely empty. And to his surprise, he inquired about the matter, that what was the reasons which drained the financial conditions of France. And he came to understand that there are certain factors which drain the financial conditions of France. They are such as, number one, the king who was having a very costly palace which are located at Versailles, and this costly palace, it needs to have its maintenance, and for that the king had to spend more money for its maintenance. Second, during the war time, the France, in order to give help to the 13 American colonies, he spent the huge amount in the war. And in order to spend the money in the war, he had to take loan from the lender, and the lender had given loan to the France government, in which all the money which was spent in the war in delivering or in giving help to the 13 American colonies to get freedom from Britain. So the war expenses which drained the financial conditions of France. So apart from that, dear children, the government, they need to have more money to maintain the government offices such as court, such as schools, such as colleges, university, and there the government need to pay salary to the employees, and also to give money to the government officials who are working at government offices. So dear children, for its maintenance, the government needed to have more money. So here the King Louis XVI, he was not having any other alternative options. So in order to maintain or to give the loan amount, he had to increase the taxes among the common peoples. So here in the previous classes we had discussions that only the third estates groups were giving taxes to the government, while the first estates and second estates peoples, they were free from giving taxes to the government. These first estate and second estate peoples were enjoying their social rights as well as their privileges based on birth. So dear children, apart from that, we understand that the king, in order to increase the taxes for the maintenance of the government offices as well as to pay the debt amount which he had taken during the time of war. So here the king who called the three estates peoples, and we see 300 representatives from the first estate and second estate, while the 600 members were given the chances to become the delegates from these third estates. And in third estates, only the rich peoples who have more wealth, they are eligible to become the delegates of this General Assembly. So dear children, here when these third estates peoples given the proposals to select more delegates from these third estates so that their demands could be approved in the General Assembly, but the king, who had to go through the old principles, and according to the old principles, the king has to give the proposals, or the king who given the proposals to have the rights from one persons from each estates who will become the representatives of this General Assembly. So here, according to the old principles, the king who said that he will follow the old principles, and in the old principles, dear children, we see that from each estates only one representatives will represent in this General Assembly. So when the king who rejected the demands of the third estates, during that time these third estates peoples, they got very angry and they were depressed, they were very sad, and when they were very sad, they said that they said to start the revolt movement, as well as they started doing revolting against the kings, and they said that unless and until they frame the constitutions of India, they will not disperse from this General Assembly. And they started framing the constitutions of the constitutions of France, and they started doing in 1791. And in 1791, when the struggles was becoming very painful, and when the peoples were started revolting against the king continuously, at last or finally the king who became the constitutional monarchy, and he accepted the General Assemblies whose powers the General Assembly from now onwards will be checking the powers of the king. So here, dear children, here we understood that the king who is having unlimited power and absolute power, so with the continuous revolt made by the middle classes groups in France, at last or finally the king who agreed to remain So, dear children, after a long revolt, here the king who had agreed to become the constitutional monarchy of France. So, dear children, as we understood that the National Assembly who had drafted the constitutions in 1791, and the main objective of the constitutions is to limit the power of the monarch. So why they framed the constitutions? Because in previous classes we understood that these third categories of peoples, or the third estates peoples, who are going through a very painful time, a very hard time. There is a crop failure, there is epidemic, there is subsistence crisis, there is bad harvest. In spite of that also, the king who is imposing taxes on the peoples. So the peoples, when they understood that there should be equality in the society, when they were inspired by the philosophers, and when they inspired by the philosophers to have equality in the society, they started revolting against the kings. And in 1791, the France peoples, or the General Assembly, who framed the constitutions for the France society. And the main objective of these constitutions is to limit the powers of the monarch. So here the monarchy power was limited, and these powers were, so again they said that instead of centralizing the powers on particular individuals, I mean to say that instead of giving the centralizations of monarchy power, here, they, according to the constitutions, what they did was they assigned the powers to different institutions, which we have made the pictures here. So we see the distributions of power which was given to the important organs of the government. They are constructing the federal structures here. And according to those federal structure, the power distributions are happening here. So here, the monarchy power was not centralized in kings or monarchy. Rather than, according to the constitutions they drafted in 1791, accordingly they are distributing the powers among the different organs of the government, that is such as judiciary, executive and legislature. So dear children, here the France is becoming constitutional monarchy in 1791, and when France became the constitutional monarchy, they adopted the constitutional monarchy in which the power was distributed among the various organs of the government. They are such as judiciary, executive as well as legislature. So dear children, here we understood that it is a federal structures which are adopted in 1791 in France, because during the time of monarchy, peoples were going through a very hard time. They were not having social rights, equality, freedom, dignity in the society. Only the rights was given to the first estates and second estates. So after a long drawn out process of struggles, here in 1791, France is becoming the constitutional monarchy. And with the becoming of constitutional monarchy, we see the divisions of power which are happening at the three level of government, that is known as judiciary, executive and legislature. So here we will discuss how the distributions of powers happens in France society. So dear children, as we understood that the constitutions of 1791 which given the powers to the National Assembly, and these National Assembly members were indirectly elected by the peoples, and here the voting rights was given to those persons who is giving more taxes to the government, that is such as at least 3 days of a labor wages has to be given to the government. Those peoples will become eligible to give vote to the general as well as the national assemblies, and those who are giving votes to the governments, votes to these national assembly, they are called active citizens, and remaining man and woman who are not having the voting rights are called the passive citizens, as you can see in the pictures itself. So here the active citizens is 4 million out of 28 millions. So who is becoming eligible to give votes to this National Assembly? Those peoples who are giving more taxes to the government, they have the voting rights. And here we understood that the active citizens are those peoples who has the voting rights, who has the political rights, are coming under the category of becoming active citizens. And here the passive citizens are those peoples who are not having voting rights. And in National Assembly, we see 745 members were elected by the active citizens. And according to the constitutions which was made in 1791, this is how the powers was distributed. The power is not resting in one particular persons, but according to the constitutions of 1791, it is giving the status to France to become the constitutional monarchy here. So here, different kind of activities will be done by different institutions or different institutions of the government. Judiciary, they will look into the matter of giving justice to the people, so they will deal with the legal matter here. And the executives are the one who is going to help the different kind of activities, or they are the one who will execute the policy in the society. And here those people who are elected in national assemblies, they are the legislature, one who is making law for the nations. So dear children, according to the constitutions of 1791, we see the distributions of powers which are happened here. we see the judiciary, the executive and legislatures, and here the 745 members who is controlling the executive as well as these kings, and king is becoming the constitutional monarchy here. So apart from that, dear children, when they framed the constitutions in 1791, they declare several kind of human rights which are given to men and women, which are given to the citizens of France, and that is such as right to life, right to freedom of speech, right to freedom of opinion, right to equality before law, and all these rights are considered the rights of the human beings which the human has to enjoy by birth, and it is the duty of the state to protect the citizens and to give the natural rights here. So dear children, in today's topic, as we learn here that after framing the constitutions of India, the constitutions of France, they had developed the constitutional monarchy in which the political systems of France adopted the distributions of power. Thank you so much, my dear children, for listening to me.